The Commonwealth Period in the Philippines. What is Commonwealth? The Commonwealth in the Philippines refers to a period in Philippine history from 1935 to 1946, when the Philippines was Commonwealth of the United States. It laid the groundwork for the country's democratic institutions and provided a framework for the country's transition to independence. The announcement of the U.S. taking the Philippines for benevolent and noble purpose was made by the President William McKinley in his 1898 State of Union Address. McKinley stated that the United States had no desire for territorial expansion, but was taking control of the Philippines in order to uplift and civilize the people of the islands. He believed that the United States had a moral obligation to help Filipinos, who he described as uncivilized and in need of guidance and assistance. McKinley also argued that the United States had a duty to spread Christianity and democracy throughout the world. In 1902, the United States Congress passed the Philippine Bill, also known as the Philippine Organic Act, which established a civil government for the Philippines. The bill was signed into law by President Theodore Roosevelt. The bill also established a system of courts and provided for the protection of individual rights and civil liberties, such as freedom of speech, religion, and the press. But after more than 10 years since the bill passed, with no serious move on the part of the American government to grant the Philippine independence, the Filipino politicians pressured the Americans to stand by their promise of independence. The Jones Law, also known as the Philippine Autonomy Act, was passed by the United States Congress in 1916 and served as the significant step towards Philippine independence. The law was sponsored by William Jones, a member of the House of Representatives who had been appointed as a chairman of the House Committee on Insular Affairs, which oversaw U.S. colonial possessions. The law also provided the greater representation of the Filipinos in the Philippines Commission, the governing body of the Philippines. The Jones Law was seen as a major step towards Philippine independence, as it provides for greater self-rule and autonomy. However, it still fell short for granting full independence to the Philippines, and many Filipinos continued to demand complete independence from U.S. colonial rule. After seeing another decade with no tangible actions, and because of that, 2 successive independence missions was sent to the United States. The first mission was on December 1931, also known as Ox-Rox Mission. It was led by Sergio Osmena and Manuel Rojas. They presented the Hard-Hose-Cutting Act that provided for 10 years transition period before the United States will recognize Philippine independence. But then, it was rejected by the American High Commissioner representing the U.S. President in the country and the Philippines in it, especially the provision that gives U.S. President the right to maintain land and other properties reserved for the military use. Therefore, Manuel Quezon was tasked to head another independence mission to the United States.
In December 1933, Quezon returned to the Philippines from the United States with a slightly amended version of the Hare-Hos-Cutting Bill. It was authored by Senator Miller Tydings and Representative Mac Duffy. It was the Tydings mark of the act that will soon create the Philippine Commonwealth. Tydings-McDuffie Act, also called Philippine Commonwealth and Independence Act of the 1934. The U.S. statute that provided for the Philippine independence to take effect on July 4, 1946. The bill was signed by the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 24, 1934. Do you know Andrew Carnegie He is one of the most important philanthropists of his era and industrialist. He tried to purchase the Philippines worth of $20 million. Yes, you heard it right, $20 million. For the independence of the Filipino from the United States. And take note, this $20 million would have come out pocket of Carnegie himself. What was the purpose of creating the Philippine Commonwealth? The purpose of creating the Philippine Commonwealth apparently was the self-proclaimed American mandate and educating and training the Filipinos in the science of self-government. The Commonwealth was be a transition period that was supposed to last for 10 years from 1935 to 1945, in which the administrative skills of the Filipinos would be honored before they could be granted absolute independence. It was the ultimate exemplification of the Philippinization of gradual transfer of colonial administration from the Americans to Filipinos' hands, in which Filipinos could demonstrate that they were indeed capable of governing themselves and run their own affairs. What were the moral reaction of the issue of Philippines independence? Moral reaction toward the Commonwealth and the issue of the independence was actually varied. It was mostly leaders who benefit from the Philippine state system and Moros who realized that resistance was futile, who favored independence, and the Christian Filipinos and those Moros who considered that later as their traditional enemies. And those who feared that moral interest and concern would not be heard or addressed are the ones who wanted to separate independence. Here are some of the statements of the Datu who did not want the idea of becoming independent with the Christian Filipino. Datu Sakaluran and Abdul Kamid stated that in the recent constitution of the Philippine Commonwealth, no provision is made that would operate for the welfare of the Motors. Thus, should American people grant the Philippine independence, the island of Mindanao and Sulu should not be included. Abdullah and Dato Di Maampaw Dangkal respectfully sent a request to the American president that the American people must not give us to any other race except the American people. Lastly, Dato Di Maampaw Dangkal of Dansilan also said that we would like to be under of the American rule forever. We do not want independence. We have found out that Americans as a people are kind, honest, and just moral leaders did not even want to govern themselves. The petition letters were ignored, thus Moros and Lumad would be incorporated into the Philippine body politic whether they like it or not.
During the Commonwealth period, Manuel Quezon identified three major priorities to improve for the sake of national economy. The first priority is the development of Mindanao for the sake of national economy. Due to the overpopulation, those farmers were against the policy, as well as those who are underemployed in the northern and central parts of the Philippines. The Philippines has suffered a depressed economy. The Mindanao region was seen as the answer. The huge underdeveloped agricultural lands could grow a variety of new export crops and would improve export trade and renew national prosperity. So, in other words, Mindanao was developed, not for the sake of Mindanao and its native, but for the sake of the central government and national economy. The second priority was to increase national security. The reason why he thought of this were because of the non-Christian inhabitants perceived as not loyal to the Philippine government. Also, the existence of Japanese agriculturalists and entrepreneurs in Davao, mainly for Japanese expansionism. So, as a response to the threat, Quezon encouraged the native Christian of the zoning Visayas to migrate in Mindanao. It was so remarkable due to the fact that it surpassed the migration rate during the American period. They also exerted efforts in advancing the integration of the Moro population, but it brought more harm than help. Quezon was talking of laws that would be applied to Christian and non-Christian as if they were a homogeneous people. During the time, Quezon lacks cultural sensitivity. He wasn't able to consider the diversity of culture and religion. One of the issues would be the polygyny, marriage of Moros, and also the sultanship. He didn't abolish the Barrios Law, which somehow gave Moros and Lumans distinct treatment during the American colonial period. For instance, in January 1937, he abolished the Bureau of Non-Christian Tribes, which was the only agency that catered the special need of the non-Christian people. He also abolished the native leadership of having datus and sultan to a more Western and allied form of government, which is present until now. The Commonwealth government was actually to provide a good training ground for Filipino leaders in preparation for the eventual independence. There were mistakes during the Commonwealth. First, there wasn't enough government representative from the non-Christian in Mindanao. Mostly the Moros and Lumans were marginalized due to the fact that the only few of them availed the Western education. Second, the government initiated the development of Mindanao and utilized its natural resources, not mainly for the natives of Mindanao, but for the sake of central government or Manila-centered. Third, Quezon aimed to practice the recognition of unified government, where somehow, due to the reason of treating all citizens equally, but he lacked the sensitivity to the diversity of cultures that the Philippines have. He trampled down some long-held tradition, such as having a datu leadership, due to its politics the non-Christian people, the Moros and the Lumans, generating various kinds of perception, as well as growing their political maturity.